Hello, my name is Mandolin Royal, and today we have my little science project up for review. We're going to get back into the purebred American Bresse, probably for the bulk of the duration of the season, but I just wanted to do a quick little update on these guys and go over some of the stuff I'm looking at and what the plan is here before we get back to our regularly scheduled programming. So we have Buddy here. He's a 1-year-old Chantecler male that was from a friend in Vermont when he stopped by for a little visit. And I gotta say, I love this bird. He is so cool, calm, and collected. And I see merit and benefit in using him to gain that cushion comb onto a more winter-friendly sort of bird. That also has the table traits, because those table traits are what we're after at the end of the day. So this is the mother to their first daughter. I did just a small hatch of 2 eggs, 1 hatched, before I started filling up the incubator with some more to see where this project could go. And I kind of want to talk about what's in my mind as far as that goes. This first daughter, she's at 14 weeks old. And she has the best blend of temperament too, but she's also showing really good growth traits. And she picked up a better, spring to the ribs. Better width, better fleshing. Her growth is on par for what I was kind of expecting. So we're going to take a look at these 3, and we're going to see how the traits combined into this first example of their offspring. So Buddy here weighs in at 1-year-old, 8.4 pounds. Now if we do grams, that's going to be 3,810 grams. He didn't quite have the same level of fleshing, and he has good width, but he still has sort of like a pointier drop to his keel in here, and that has a big impact on table traits. And at the end of this video, I'm going to try to find my picture that shows kind of what I mean by that. He was called out of his original flock for the down color he had as a chick, being a little more yellow, but he turned out to be actually pretty white, just filthy. But take a note of his shape, and it's worth noting that he's also pretty fluffy in the feathers, and that helped him in Vermont for super cold winters there. Are you gonna let me show how fluffy? You just take your finger and get it into the feathers, and you can kind of get a gauge of the depth of the feathers. Since I'm holding a camera, it's going to be tricky with one hand. But when you're at home with your own birds, go ahead and check the depth and see how far out the feather depth before you hit the chicken itself. On the American Bresse, I prefer a much tighter bird, and that does a lot to show their outward traits. So here we have little Miss Mama. She's coming up on 2 years old. I'm gonna get her weight. So she's at 5.6 pounds, which is 2,574 grams. And I didn't like her for one of my purebred Bresse pens because her wattles are a little bit different in their length. But everything else about her is actually pretty good, and she had really good fleshing. And she had that added underbody width that I wanted to put with him to see what would happen. You can tell her feathering is a lot tighter than what his is. He does take really good care of his girls, though, and that's very important in the flock environment. We'll get into some more similarities and differences between them. But here is their 14-week-old daughter. And she picked up that cushion comb because that is more dominant than the single comb. And that's what will help the winter hardiness the most to avoid frostbite issues. She did not get blue feet or yellow feet. She got some sort of pinkish, grayish, weird color. She is looser feathered than her mother, but not as loose as her sire. Her temperament, for not being hand-reared, it's pretty cute. And the head, to me, seems to be decidedly almost Cornish looking, especially in the eye. And I would hazard a guess that perhaps both breeds have that in there, or she's showing some throwback traits. But she's going to be a perfectly winterized bird. And she is growing really, really well. Let me go ahead and get her weight. So today she weighed in at 4.4 pounds. About half as much as her sire. At 14 weeks, not bad. She felt great too. And in grams, that is 1,980 grams. She does need to go through another molt before we really see what type of feathering she's going to end up with. But more importantly, she passed the hand test and the feel, and I'll go ahead and pull her out and go over her from the above perspective. But these two parents, see how his back looks a little short? It's really not that short, but he's so fluffy. Versus Mama showing a much longer back. Stand upright so we can see you better. And then when you go over to the offspring, she picked up the length and the tighter feathers to show it off. So that's neat. I'm excited to get some more eggs in the incubator and see what else, because I'd like to see a better depth of leg color. Because essentially what I'm going to go for here is the American Bresse growth rate, the fleshing, that underbody width, and pretty much just changing out the comb to get that winterized cushion comb so that it doesn't matter if it's 40 below, you're not going to have to worry about frostbite from oversized combs, which the American Bresse can be a little bit prone to. But the true test will be when we get the extra boys from this experiment and we bring them to dinner, because there's going to be notes to take on the meat to bone ratio, how they developed fat, where that fat was, how it melted during cooking, the color of the skin to get away from his yellow and to get to their white. That's going to come with pair mating and eating a whole bunch of them to get it right as we go through this project, which is going to be a really long-term project. This isn't going to happen overnight, and I'm going to be into this for at least 5 years before I even have a hope of having anything that breeds true. But in the meantime, we're going to be working on sorting out the traits, looking for the table quality that the American Bresse has, and figuring out a way forward of just keeping that super useful northern comb while improving fleshing. Because this guy was a little bit exhibition bred, which is good for quality and the look and the aesthetic. But I want to see the growth rate and the fleshing that I'm used to. But let me go ahead and get set up to do the overhead evaluation on the first little pullet, and then I'll get everybody put back. Because it's a beautiful day outside today for February, and they're itching to go out. Alright, before I get into her hands-on evaluation, I want you to look at this terrible doodle. And this is the feel that I'm hoping to avoid. And this is the feel that I'm hoping to gain. So while both of these illustrations show width, the shape of the body is very different. This one feeling more sharp and angular, which denotes very poor fleshing. And this one where it's more rounded, and that is translated into meat. So if you're doing the dual purpose thing, you want to look for the birds that feel like this one and not like this one. This will not breed itself into a freezer-filled future. This one will. And anytime you dabble in a project, you need to be willing to eat the ones who are not that great, because their marketability beyond that is just regular old general layers, whereas that meat aspect is more elusive and more valuable. So keep that in mind when you're handling birds. Do they feel like a really sharp, angular, bony kind of bird, or do they feel like you can barely find the keel? Because if you can barely find the keel, that means they're buried in meat, and that's the bird you want. So I'm hoping she's more like this and not like that. All right, so I've got our little 14-week-old project girl here. At least I hope it's a girl. The only downside to that cushion comb and the way that they grow is that it takes quite a while to establish gender, versus the American Bresse with their quick growth and development. They tell me gender at like 4 weeks old. But it's okay, and we're gonna figure it out. And in a dual purpose sort of environment, you don't need to know that early anyways. It'll sort itself out as the flock progresses. So when I first went back into that viewing cage to grab her and I picked her up, the first thing I noticed was substance. And it's that substance that first got me going into the American Bresse, because I had never before put my hands on a bird that felt the way that they felt. So that's going to be one of the priorities of what I look for in this project to move them forward. She has been unhandled. I've probably pulled her out of the grow pen like twice. So I want to kind of reassure her that this is all fine, this is normal, and I'm not going to invade her space too forwardly. When you first get a bird, you can calm them by going right underneath their chin, petting them a little bit. They're going to tell you all about it, and you're just going to tell them, yeah, I don't care, it's fine. You're fine. But we can also, during the head evaluation, look at the width. And we want to kind of see if we can see eyeballs. And you can do this on day-old chicks too. But look, from above, unless she tilts her head, we can't see any eyeballs. And the skull width is immediately there. And that will always translate to the rest of the body also being wide. So since she already looks great on the head, if I can get her right there and support her and get my thumb on the back of her head and let her know this is all fine, that's going to help chill her out as we work on getting her used to being handled. She has the right temperament to readily adapt to it. But I'm a pretty firm believer in being relatively hands-off through their rearing and finding those better temperaments, because temperament can tie in a little bit with their expression of vigor as well. And when I find birds that give off a vibe of tolerance and intelligence, that usually translates to pretty good ranging birds and birds that have some gumption and get up and go. And it's shown more in how you raise them and how they act when you present them with new situations. If you're familiar with dog training, horse training, or working with livestock in general, you know temperament ties in with the ease of care and the day-to-day operations. Just by doing this, I feel her relaxing and sitting down. The way you handle them, that'll set the stage for what you can expect going forward. And if you have super flighty birds, that can be a little bit of a complication when it comes to collecting this important data of growth and how they're performing throughout the various growth milestones. Because if it's a fight every time, you're not going to feel like doing it that often. And doing it often is really important. So hopefully they cooperate so that you can do your job of going through your selection and evaluations. A bird like this, I've put my hands on her maybe 3 times in 14 weeks. And look, I can let go and she's not freaking out about it. So from the above view, check out the width going on up here. That's nice to see. So if I put my hand right on top and I look for where the wings tie in on the shoulder, she's a good 3 fingers right there. Look, there she goes sitting down. Will she stay? Nope, still not sure. If I turn her this way and I start looking for that back length, she's already a full hand. Just by gently resting this part of my wrist at the base of her tail and running my hand forward, that's some good length right there. Now she is in the middle of molting some feathers out and growing some feathers in, but I'm going to go ahead and pull her close to my body since I am at a table height right here. That makes that part easy, so that she feels well supported. And then I'm going to kind of tease a wing out. This is the first time she's ever had to deal with this. Nice. Just for practice. It probably won't matter much in her life, but this is all practice. For her, for me, for you. Not gonna ask a whole lot from her. This width in here, this is the substance. But the real substance is on her undercarriage. So I'm gonna bring her close and lift a little to get my left hand underneath. The total length of her keel right now, from my thumb to the tip of my index finger, middle finger. It's hard to tell from this angle, but reasonable, excellent for this age. Her fleshing is sort of a blend between her mother and her father. It does not resemble one or the other. It is kind of like a blend, and that's to be expected when you're in the F1 hybrid of a direct cross. Now, it's worth noting that the parents were both independently line bred within their families, and then they outcrossed together to make this baby. So their F1 offspring should actually be incredibly consistent. And that consistency is going to disappear in the second and third generation away from the original cross. And that's something really important to keep in mind. But gosh dang, when I put my hand on the front of her chest, that's got a lot of substance and fleshing to it as well. Now, I haven't yet checked her pin bone spacing or the distance to her keel from those pin bones. We're going to go ahead and do that live and in person right now. So I'm going to take her and kind of bend her up a little bit. That's going to spread her tail out, such as it is. She's got a lot of growth going on right now. And right now, she's at 2 fingers. She's not an active lay. She's nowhere near laying age. That's right for right now. Time will tell if that ends up tighter than what's preferred. But right now, 2 fingers easily dropping between her 2 pin bones. And those are located just below and on either side of the tail. Here's one right there, and the other one's on the opposing side. The other important measurement back here is the distance from the end of the keel. That end of the keel is right here. So I'm going to go ahead and drop 3 fingers in, because that's what I like to look for. And these 3 fingers drop right in with no room for another finger. Yeah, if I add my pinky, it won't fit, but a solid 3 fingers there at 14 weeks, I'll go ahead and take that as a win. Overall, though, I think we might be on to something useful and productive and kind of cute looking with a super solid temperament. But we'll see. The next step from here is taking this female and her comparable sisters to a purebred American Bresse boy to get back into those breast table traits, but to keep that comb, because that is very useful in the colder climates. That's the only thing I want to change. Everything else I want to keep in line with the American Bresse. So we're going to have to work on the tightness of the feathering, the growth rate, the fleshing, leg color. Half the size of her sire already. That's pretty neat. Frostbite wise in the American Bresse flock, it's not been too bad here, but I know further north it's been pretty bad. So this is my attempt to fix that, because I do like to experiment and I do like to play around, and this is going to occupy that time without straying too far away from my actual goals. So this is just the fun little science project. So far, so good. She did get the toes of her daddy, so we're going to work at straightening that out while we change foot color too. So more on this later. Feel free to like and subscribe, though I am going to dive more into the purebred American Bresse and the different breeding arrangements and the trait expression, the growth rate, and all those little details. So feel free to come along on this journey as we fill up our freezer. That's the whole point. Breakfast eggs, freezer birds, and keeping the thing going without bringing in new birds. Buddy, here's my last addition. We are now closing up the flock. I have enough material, genetically speaking, to keep going with this indefinitely if I make good decisions for their breeding future. So more on this later.